So when you move, it's a very long process until you actually feel, and I don't want to say settled because that doesn't kind of feel right for me.
Yeah.
But until you feel like, oh, this could work, I think it
Yeah.
takes a year.
It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. And if you want to join my Facebook group, go to the Germany Experience on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page, but attached to it is also a Facebook group, and there you can discuss the episodes and issues. And right at the start of this episode, I'm going to start with what's on everyone's mind, I guess. COVID-19, coronavirus. Here it is in Germany. A lot of cases. As of me recording this right now, the cases have doubled. But am I panicked? No, not yet. I don't think I'm panicking just yet. I'm a little uneasy, let's put it that way. And I think a lot of people are uneasy. But I've also seen a lot of people panicking, and I don't think it's cause for panic just yet. All indications seem to be that it's just a very bad case of the flu. And yes, it has a higher death rate than normal flu. It's got at the moment, I think, sitting around somewhere like 1% death rate. And even that might drop as more cases are discovered. But it's a bad flu. It's a dangerous flu. As I said, I'm feeling a little uneasy about it, but I asked in my Facebook group, the Germany Experience Facebook group, how's everyone feeling about COVID-19? Nervous, relaxed? Is it very concerning, or is there a lot of media hype? Got some answers. Fiona responded by saying, for myself, I'm not overly concerned, but I'm worried in case it affects my parents back in England. My mum in particular, as she has existing health conditions. And that, I think, is the cause for concern for a lot of people, as we know people who are maybe more in frail health or so on. So it's exactly the same for me. I'm less worried about myself, but I'm worried about people with frail health. And of course, I've got a 4-month at home. So that is something that does weigh on my mind a little bit. Lynn wrote, relaxed is the wrong word to say for myself, but I am not at all concerned. And Sarah said, I am more like cautious, not a pandemic yet. So not so worried yet. So it seems to be, at least from those responses, feeling similar to what I'm feeling at the moment. So, well, one of the good things that has come out of this is I've learned a fantastic new German word, which I didn't understand at first. It's Hamsterkauf. And that literally translates as hamster buying or hamster purchasing. And when I first saw this in the news reports, in the newspapers, I couldn't understand what in God's name does a hamster have to do with the coronavirus. And I was like, is it because people are buying the hamsters for food if there's a shortage of food, or is it that the hamsters get the disease first so they know that their household is infected? I honestly, these are the thoughts that went through my head. Of course, it's none of those things. It's just a German word which means panicked buying, where people go in and buy everyday Lebensmittel or everyday items, and they completely stock up on them. And that's what's happening. A lot of supermarkets have reported that people are making these Hamsterkaufs and going crazy in the supermarkets. So that is a cool word that I've learned out of this, Hamsterkauf, and it doesn't have anything to do with actually buying hamsters. But we're not here to talk about coronavirus. We're not here to talk about these big overarching themes. There's lots in the news at the moment that you can get bogged down by, or if you're spending too much time on the news at the moment with all the things that have been reported on, it's going to bring you down. It's going to bring you down. So what we're doing here is we're not going to focus on that. If there's one thing I'm very good at, is blindly ignoring everything around me and just pretending everything is okay. So that's what I'm going to do for the rest of this show. And let's start off with this. Last week, I read out a 1-star review that I got for the Carnival episode. And I said, hey, let's balance this out, because that 1-star review was right on the front page of the Apple Podcast profile for this podcast. And you delivered. Of course you did. I got some 5-star reviews, which I am so happy about. I'll just quickly read 3 of them that I got. Judy wrote, 5 stars, 50 years later. I love hearing these interviews and comparing the experiences of modern day expats with mine from the year I spent in Germany in the late 1960s. Sean and his guests approach the subject of adapting to life in Germany with humor, exceptional insight, and a display of sentiment. Thanks to all of them for sharing with Sean's listeners. Yes, thank you to my guests for sharing with my listeners. I think there would be no show if it wasn't for you guys. No one wants to come here and listen to me yammer on for 45 minutes. Beth wrote, excellent podcast. Each episode has something that speaks to me. I love it. I found the Fasching episode interesting because not all of us are big fans of it. There are pros and cons to wherever you live. Dankeschön. Bitteschön, Beth. And finally, someone named Iceboy wrote, "Great perspective on Germany. I've been a fan of this podcast now for a few months now, and it's only getting better as Sean settles into a unique style and direction." Ah, stop it. He's got a great radio voice. Wow, that's going to make me a little self-conscious. And takes the time to plan out his interviews and topics well with impressive editing. I swear, I'm glad you noticed the editing. Not many people do. I'm excited to see what he's got in store for 2020. So am I, Ice Boy, so am I. I'd love to hear more funny topics. Yeah, I'm working on it. More controversial topics. I'm also working on it. And of course, more advice about German bureaucracy and how to navigate it all. Yeah, that comes automatically. Maybe an interview with an Ausländerbeamter. That's a great idea, Ice Boy. And I need to follow up with her, actually. I was in discussions with an Ausländerbeamter, and I need to make sure she comes on the show. I'll follow up. Ice Boy, I'm on it. I'm going to follow up on that. So thanks to everyone who gave me 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. My profile is looking much better now. So on to this week's guest. Steph is from Bavaria in Germany originally, and she moved to the UK when she was in her early 20s. And she spent some time in the UK, met her husband. She had 2 children while she was in the UK. And then they moved to the States, first of all to Silicon Valley, and then later on to Austin, Texas. And then they moved back to the UK and realized very soon after moving back to the UK that it wasn't where they wanted to be. And in the end, they've moved back to Austin, Texas, which is where Steph is now at the time that we recorded our interview. They've been there for quite a few years. And Steph has a lot of interesting insights to give about being multilingual, because she speaks multiple languages, but she speaks English like a native speaker does, really. And you'll hear when you hear the interview. And it's interesting to get her perspective. One of the things she talks about is having 2 personalities, in one personality in German and one personality in English. We also talk about other aspects of being multilingual, and we also discuss her views of Germany, which she has kind of from afar. Another thing that's interesting about Steph's story is that she was able to discover her true self as an English-speaking person. So she felt that German was too restrictive and not really giving her a way to express her real self, and that was something that English afforded to her. So here is Steph's story. Take a listen. So you've been a German now, living abroad. That's a unique part of your identity now as a foreigner living in the States. How much of a German do you still see yourself as?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I feel after all those years away, I don't really have a kind of clear national identity anymore.
Yeah.
I don't really feel German, and I feel very much that, yes, it's my, that's where my roots are, but I've spent so much time outside of Germany. And I've kind of accumulated so many other cultural influences, and Germany has changed so much too over the last 22 years that sometimes when I read, I always read the paper and I try and follow the politics and all that kind of thing, and even just the language, how much the language has changed. I feel it's very different to when I lived there. But then I have changed so much too. So my kind of attitude has changed definitely in my perspective.
Yeah. But I think your 20s is a time that you change a lot as a person anyway, because I lived in
my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I lived in one city in South Africa for the whole of my 20s. I was in Johannesburg. But even there, I can think of how much I changed from the beginning of 20s and the end of 20s. So it's a very formative, a time of a lot of flux, a lot of time of figuring out just what your personality is. And if you add at the same time then being abroad in a different culture, there's a whole lot of variables kind of working together on shaping your identity.
Yes, absolutely. And that's actually one of the most interesting things about it. So I feel like I instinctively knew that I needed to move away in order to really, that sounds funny, but to really kind of become myself. So that kind of sense of, I felt like if I'd stayed, I kind of felt, I don't want to say I felt stifled, but I felt kind of limited in a way.
In Germany.
And in Germany. And so I always knew I needed to move away. And I feel like the UK for me was that I could start from scratch, where you can kind of reinvent yourself
It's
when
the
you
best.
move, and no one knows anything, and it's so liberating.
It is liberating. It is liberating.
It's so amazing. And the strange thing is, and this is, so like I said, I had that sense of feeling kind of, I can't really show who I am or who I want to be. And I felt, and that's one of the cliches also that people have of Germany and the Germans. And Germans are very happy to tell you their point of view right out, and to they're happy to criticize, and I just wasn't made for that. I felt like people just looking at me funny or saying, "Oh, don't do that, that's a stupid idea," would just completely stop me in my tracks.
Yeah.
And so I instinctively felt that I couldn't, that Germany wasn't the place for me to really come out of my shell.
Yeah.
And I really felt that in the UK, and with also speaking English was kind of, I was becoming someone else, and I could be my true self. And that kind of happened there. And it's so interesting because the UK is just like Germany, it's not one of the most free and open-minded, and people it's very limiting too, and the class system, and they have all these the same kind of rigid structures and things. But to me, it didn't feel like that. I felt like I'm new, I can be whoever I want to be, and it was really funny because that only really occurred to me recently when I listened to who was the lady with the bicycles and church bells?
Oh, that was Shannon. That was Shannon. Yeah, I think it was episode
Shannon.
6. I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was either it wasn't episode 6. Episode 6 or 8. Shannon. Yeah.
And it was so funny because she said something like, and she from what I remember, she lives in a Bavarian kind of village.
Yes, yeah.
So, and she said how free she felt in Germany and how much more free everything was. And I just thought, you are living in one of the most conservative, small-minded areas, and you have that sense of freedom. So then I thought, but I did the same. I moved to the UK and I moved to a small town there, and why is it? But maybe it's just something that happens when you move way out of your country.
But this is where everything gets a little vague, or how can I put it? A little schwammy, a little. I don't know what word I'm trying to say in English. It gets a little blurred, is what I'm trying to say. Is because just like you say, you had the experience of moving away from Germany and feeling liberated in England.
Yeah.
And there was Shannon, who moved from the US to Germany, and she felt that sense of liberation. And
yes.
When you talk about all the stereotypes of being a foreigner and an expat and moving away and everything, it actually, some of it is true on a very conceptual level, or maybe on some level, but it depends on so many factors or variables about how you see it. It depends on where you're coming from personally, your own family environment, your own country, how you've been in your country, and also then, like you say, how you decide to reinvent yourself when you get to the new country, and the experiences that you have there. So it's all very, very different.
Yeah, but that's the most interesting thing about this, and talking to other people about this and what it was like for them to move and to kind of make a new life somewhere else, because everyone is so different. And I mean, with the UK too, I moved there and I loved it. And I had so many friends or family like, well, why do you like it there? It's, look at the weather, and people couldn't understand. And I have friends also who moved there and lived there for a year and hated everything about it. And that's just, it's so individual.
It is individual.
And yeah.
But I definitely agree about the reinvention of yourself. But it is always interesting what things come with you. Like you think, okay, I'm going to reinvent yourself. And then after a while, it's a very sobering and a very, it brings a lot of clarity when you see, wait, I've tried to reinvent myself, but I've fallen back into these old habits, or I'm still doing this thing that I was trying to get away from. So there is a lot of reinvention, but there's also a lot of self-discovery where you realize, wow, this is a core aspect of who I am, and it's not going to matter where I am in the world or what situation I'm in. This is going to be me.
Absolutely. And that's why I feel you really get to know yourself very well by doing this kind of thing. And I found that moving to the US was for me was a way to reconnect with my inner German again. And that was really interesting because in the UK, I always felt like I was trying to suppress my Germanness. I wasn't necessarily telling people. And I got to a point where my accent was so English that people could not tell I was German at all. So that it was just I was at a point where they couldn't put me in a particularly in a box. They couldn't, but they were like they couldn't detect the German. That's kind of come back since living in the US because of all the whatever influences that I'm not surrounded by British English now. It's different. Yeah. But I kind of I was quite proud of that to not be German, and I felt I wasn't really talking about being German and all that because people didn't really want to hear it. It's like I spoke German with my kids from day one, but when we were out in public, it was just English. Speaking English. Mm-hmm. And then in the US, it was different because people all of a sudden were like, "Oh wow, so you're German? Oh, I'm German too. My granddad came over and people they were so interested in the German side of me. And we we had a couple of Oktoberfests that we organized for the local schools as a fundraiser, and it was so much fun. And I kind of feel like in the last it's been almost 10 years in the States now. I've learned so much about Germany in that time. So kind of rediscovering my country, my home country.
So let's switch over to the language aspect now, because how is your German now that you've been living so far away from Germany? Has it gotten bad?
It has. So the other thing is, I've always worked as a translator, but I gave that up 2 years ago, something like that. I wasn't doing that full time. Well, I was doing it full time for a while, but I felt I needed to do something that was getting me out of the house and not, I was kind of sick of just sitting at home with my laptop and no one to talk to. And since then, I've really noticed that my German has deteriorated. I don't speak it I speak to my kids, but we mainly speak English at home. And so unless I'm on the phone with my mum or my sister, I don't speak it at all.
Now, you've got a blog that that you've had for quite a few years. You've got posts going all the way back to 2010, I think it was.
Yes.
It's called transcontinentaloverload.com.
Yes, quite a mouthful.
And back in May 2015, you wrote a blog called Multiple Languages, Multiple Personalities, which I found very interesting to read.
Yes.
And I definitely recommend that people go and read that specific. Read all of them, but specifically this one, it's very interesting. But there's one paragraph that you wrote that was particularly fascinating to me, and I'm just going to read it here.
Yeah,
wrote,
please do.
Someone asked me the other day if I preferred speaking English or German. I was thrown for a minute and then started to seriously think about this question. Do I have a preference? Do I feel more me speaking one over the other? I'm not a true bilingual. Then you're going a bit into your past, which we've spoken about. And you say that you've become a late bilingual. I've definitely noticed how the two languages have shaped me and given me another dimension in life that I wouldn't have had as a monolingual. But how have they shaped me? I am me regardless of the language I speak. Or am I? Do I have a German personality as well as an English one? So what is the answer to that, Steph? Because this is something I have pondered myself, because I have something, but maybe you have some insights to give about that.
So, I mean, the interesting thing about speaking two languages, and I'm just going to talk about two languages rather than, other people do 3, 4, but with two at a very high level. So, like I said, almost bilingual level. You really, because you can add all the nuances in either language. So, in a way, it shouldn't make any difference. In a way, you should be, if you can say everything that you want to say, that you want to express in either language, then you should really be the same. But I find that I'm not.
So you have two different Stephs.
I definitely do. There we go. Absolutely. And I've touched on this earlier in some ways when I said I was moving to the UK and I felt like I was coming into my own. And it was partly to do with the language, because I kind of felt really that I could be funnier in English. I could be, my sense of humor and my kind of quirky sense of humor could come out in English.
Right.
But I couldn't really get that across in German. So in some ways, British Steph was much more fun than German Steffi. So there definitely is something said for that. And it's the language. The languages are different, and German is an amazing language. I love German, and the way you can say certain things with just one word, boom, and you're kind of it expresses so much. But you can also do that with English and wordplay and things like that. And it just suited me, and that was the other thing. I had that sense of being in the UK, and that kind of just suited my personality and speaking the language. And
right.
So, and I do feel, interestingly enough, also I started writing in German a few years into my blog. I started, writing because I was going to write a book about the whole thing, and I thought I'll do that in German because I need to reconnect with the language. But I couldn't quite do it. I was like reading through it, and it sounded so boring.
Yeah.
I just couldn't make it sound good, and I didn't. Again, that kind of sense of humor kind of side of things. And and then I was thinking of this just this morning, because I was arguing with my kids. It's, most mornings getting teenagers out of the door. And
I thought that changes, because I'm having these arguments with my 4-year-old. I was hoping by the time she's a teenager, she just, doesn't.
Sean, you have no idea what's to come.
Oh my God.
If you think it's bad now.
Oh my God.
But so I was arguing with them. I was telling them how frustrated I was. And so I dropped them off at school. And then I was like, we did the whole thing in English. We did not speak German. So I speak German with them when I'm happy and kind, and when I'm really angry and frustrated, I speak English.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting.
I kind of think they know that too. That serious.
Okay,
she's speaking English. It's like, this is
And I think you also, I think it was in this blog post, I'm not sure if it was this one or another, you actually mentioned that the stereotype is that German is such an aggressive, such a confrontational language. That's the stereotype or the cliche. But for you, it's the opposite. When you're kind and feeling relaxed, that's when you're in German, and when you switch to English, you're stern and
Yes.
So that's quite interesting.
And also, it's just not true that German is such a harsh language. It can be.
It sounds.
But so
I think
can
it
English.
sounds like it.
It's just. I think it's really, because I now, after all this time, I can listen to German almost like an outsider, like someone who doesn't speak German. I can just hear the language. You know what? When that happens, and you're like, that sounds really kind of rough and blunt, but it can also sound so soft and beautiful, and like listening to. So whenever I really miss German or speaking German, I listen to Lieblingsgedichte der Deutschen, like the poems, like an anthology of poems.
Yeah.
And oh my God, they're so beautiful. The language is beautiful, and it's soft, and it's melodious, and And also I found that because I always used to read stories to the kids, so that was my thing, and I would always read German. So I wouldn't really read English stories to them, but German, and when you're all cozy in the evening and you kind of cuddled up in bed and you read, it does not sound harsh at all.
No, it doesn't. I think the more you get, I used to think that, because I went from a point of, I was 30 years old and spoke no German, zero German. There was I learned it from scratch. And in the beginning, I did think it was because it sounds really abrasive when you hear it and you don't understand the words. It sounds really harsh. But when you get to know it, and it doesn't take long, when you get to know it, I really fell in love with German after, I think, 6 months of learning it, and then coming here to Germany and hearing it all the time. It's very rarely that I think of it now as an aggressive language, but in the beginning, definitely, sort of to untrained ears.
It just doesn't have all the kind of all those bits and pieces that you get in English to kind of soften something. So sometimes it's just yes, no, and you wouldn't ever do that in even here in the States, you wouldn't. I mean, you don't just say yes. You just don't. There's something else you say, and that just kind of falls away in German. It's just, who needs that? Who needs we don't need any embellishments. We can just be just tell it how it is. So yeah.
And I think this the whole thing about two personalities really resonated with me as well, because it's something that I have. But the thing is, I think it's slightly different in my case, and I assume for a lot of foreigners who started learning German late, like I did, and I've had to come to terms with the fact that I will never be at a native speaker level. I'm very fluent in it. I understand quite well, but something that you were saying is that the nuances are missing for me. There's sometimes where I cannot. And it's frustrating because I just cannot express exactly what I'm trying to express. It's kind of a broader view that I'm able to get out. So that impacts the way that I view my identity when I'm speaking German as well, because I'm coming across as a little bit. I must seem stupid to people sometimes because I'm just missing the point, or it seems like I'm missing the point because I can't express that I've understood something. So that's a big deal about it.
It's a huge deal. Yes,
Yeah.
It is a huge deal. And also, I mean, do you find that people will be very willing to speak English with you and just switch to English right away? And
it was
kind of...
Yeah, it was the case. Now I think my German is better that...
So
that
they let
don't. But but the problem now is that I'm fluent enough for people to think that I'm more fluent than I am, if that makes sense. So they assume that, okay, this guy's got a very good command of German, which I do in some regards. But then when I make mistakes, they think that they don't think that I'm making mistakes. They assume that that's what I'm expressing. And sometimes it's come out wrong because I've missed the nuance somewhere. So it's
I completely understand that. Yes, totally. And I've got my theory on why, but Germans especially, I think maybe Scandinavians too, they all speak very good English. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they will always be happy to speak English with you. And I've found that, or my husband's found that too, when every time he's trying to speak German, then someone will speak English and reply in English. And
then you don't get that.
And then you just kind of think, why are they doing that? I want to learn the language. But it's really difficult because I think my theory is that especially the Germans don't like small talk, and they don't really do this. Hi, how are you? How are you doing?
Sure.
Well, they talk about the weather, but not as much as the Brits. It's more, they just don't need those kind of social lubricants so much.
Exactly.
They're quite happy to just not say anything or to, but I think it's when they feel like someone has only the basics, they are almost like, that's just kind of small talk. They're not interested in that. They want to know the deep thoughts, and instantly they want to know. Yeah. And so obviously they'll be like, oh, well, you can't say that in German, so let's just speak English so we know who you really are, because then we can. And that's, to me, I think this is probably one of the reasons why the Germans in particular because everyone always says, oh, they're so impatient. It's like, no, they just want to get to the core straight away. They don't want to talk about the blah, blah, blah. Yeah. They just want to know what you're really thinking. And so they're kind of like, no, so I don't care if you don't speak German. We need to know you. So,
that's exactly it. Yeah.
So it's hard to learn. I totally get that, and I'm glad that I don't have to learn German. I think it's not an easy language to learn.
No, it's not, and like I said, especially if you're starting it a bit later, I think it helps. Yeah. The earlier you start, if you're starting in your 20s, even, it makes a huge difference to how easily you can learn it and how easily you can sort of.
Yeah, also you have more time to devote to learning. It's like as you get older, you have less and less time to pick up new things. And running. I remember my husband running to German class, intensive class, after a full work day, like 5 days a week. And I mean, you just, you could not do that once you're past.
Yeah, once there's kids around and
oh God, no,
it's just not possible. Yeah, and it's so true. And I should be, for example, in the evenings watching TV in German or watching movies in German. But when I get home, I just want to. I'm still English enough for me to want to enjoy English. I just
and just kind of. Yeah.
So So I have to accept
Yeah.
that my German is never going to get better than it is now, which is a bit frustrating and sad.
You just yeah, but I mean, it's one of those things. You just kind of you just become a little bit more like, well, I can't do everything. So, but then your children will be. So
yeah, they will be, and that's so amazing.
Cool to see.
It's so amazing. I
just
astounded.
find that exactly. You look at them and you listen and you think, wow, you little person, and you can just switch and you sound like a native in each language. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, and
absolutely amazing.
And it's amazing how they at a young age understand when to switch, because with my daughter we very seldom spoke German to her. It was just English. And I remember one day I was speaking with my neighbor, and I never know what stories I've told on this podcast or not, so I'm not sure if this has been told before, but I was talking to my neighbor in German, and she ran up to me. I think she was about 2 years old, and she ran up to me and she said, "Papi." And she's never referred to me as Papi. She always calls me Daddy. And out of nowhere, she called me Papi, Papi, because she heard that I was speaking German. And somewhere from the Kita, she learned Papi is what they call the father, the German kids. And she automatically switched to that. It was and she'd never called me that. And I was like, what? Where did that come from? So it's incredible how they learn. Yeah.
That's
You mentioned to me when you got in touch with me that you're thinking of starting a podcast.
Yes.
So tell me, what's that podcast about, and when can we expect it?
So as I said, I've had this blog for a good 10 years, and I think 10 years is a good time to do something new. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt like writing the podcast, the blog was great for me to share my thoughts and observations, but I really, really want to share other people's views and just be less solitary, I guess. Writing is such a personal and solitary experience, and I've met so many people with so many interesting stories, and so just kind of having a conversation like this, like we've just had, it's so great to hear other people's the ways of approaching things. And so I thought I'm going to do that and use my platform, but add that. So I will keep writing blogs, and I guess each time there is a guest on the podcast that will influence a blog post. So I've already got a few people lined up. Very exciting. Various backgrounds. I have a child psychologist, and have a couple of TCKs, and then just I've got a few stay-at-home moms and a few, Anyway, so I have a good lineup, and I am right now just kind of finishing up all the technical side of things, the artwork and the music and all that. And then once it's all come together, I'm going to hopefully be launching within the next 2 months.
Very cool.
Yes, I'm really excited about it. And I think there are a lot of podcasts and YouTube channels and blogs about expat living, and people just like myself, like you and I. But there's always room for more.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of unique voices out there. And that's the wonderful thing about podcasts and also YouTube is that you really can find a unique voice that resonates with you, or listen to multiple podcasts. So it's
absolutely. And I kind of feel I wish I'd had all that when I first left Germany.
I know.
I wish
too,
I had all this information and even now, and this is I've learned so much about Germany just by watching YouTube channels of people living in Germany. I love that, and it's so interesting, and it's such a great way of connecting with people, and to also for people who are having problems and who are not sure they're doing the right thing, to then listen to someone and go, oh my God, exactly that exact thing happened to me, and oh, that's why it's like that. And just rather than reading a guide on how to be an expat and the things you need to do in advance and to prepare, and that's great too, but I love using stories as a way of doing that.
And podcast is a great way of telling those stories.
It's because I'm all about stories. I love stories. So please, come and if you wanna read more about me, just go to my blog, transcontinentaloverload.com, and there will be a button there. There's links to my Facebook page and my Twitter feed, and there will be very soon there will be a podcast button too. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified. And yeah.
Yeah, and I will put the links to your blog and to your social media accounts in the show notes.
Yeah.
So people go
thank you so much.
Go and find Steph.
Yes, let's grow this community.
Yeah.
And find people, find like-minded people, and just kind of help out some people. And yeah, I love that whole idea. Maybe you can come on my podcast one day.
I'm just
too,
waiting for the invitation, Steph. I just need an invitation.
Okay, it's in the post.
I am very promiscuous with my podcast appearances.
Well, I love that, and I think that's exactly how it should be, because we all have so much to share. So absolutely.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, usually I ask foreigners living in Germany for their advice for other foreigners in Germany, but you're a German and you've also got a lot of experience living as a foreigner in another country. What advice do you what advice do you offer for foreigners coming to Germany?
I think be prepared that it's going to be different. So, because this is something that people don't necessarily expect. They might theoretically expect it to be different, but then it feels very, very different when you're actually there.
Yeah.
You can read up on cultural differences, and there's a lot of really good literature out there, and very funny, books, guides on how to approach the Germans. But I think the advice I would give is probably the advice I would give to anybody moving anywhere else, and it's just to be open-minded, and to just know that it's going to take a year. It's going to take a year to feel kind of normal. So when you move, it's a very long process until you actually feel, and I don't want to say settled because that doesn't kind of feel right for me.
Yeah.
But until you feel like, oh, this could work, I think it takes a year. I've noticed that from all the moves I've done.
Okay.
That it really, you have to be really patient with yourself, that it's not going to work and there's going to be ups and downs. But after a year, I think you can get a feel after a year.
You get a feeling of the place, yeah.
And also, it's one of the and I guess this is true for every country. I mean, some people are more maybe open or warm, or appear more open and warm initially, but the Germans might not appear like that to start with. But just give them time, because very often it's like once you've cracked the shell, you will have a friend for life.
Yeah.
And I find that Germans are very, they just take a bit longer, and they have all these, they don't call someone a friend right away.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
They just, it's very much like, oh yeah, my colleague or my acquaintance. And you just don't call people a friend very. So Americans will be, is my friend so-and-so.
Yeah, I've just met him yesterday, but that's my friend.
And it's just the way they talk, it's just different. It's completely different, and it's just a different approach. But the Germans will not do that, so they'll take a bit longer to warm up. But once they do, I think it's and also just don't be afraid to, even if they appear like they're not smiling or they're not very warm, don't be afraid to be open and invite them and do things, and you have to be very proactive, and that's something people are not just gonna come to you.
Yeah.
People, if you want to make friends and meet people, you have to go out of your way.
Yeah.
Even if you are an introvert, even if that's not what you do, you have to do that in order to get out there. There's no other way. You have to overcome that, and just, even if you're like, I really don't want to have people around for dinner, just do it. Invite them. And if you invite the Germans, they will come. And they will come, and they won't say, oh yeah, that sounds cool, and then not show. They will
come.
They will come.
Yeah.
And so that's just, I feel like that's probably the difference between maybe Germans and other cultures. So give it time, be patient, get over yourself, and be open-minded.
Great. That's great advice.
Don't expect them to do the first step.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks, Steph, so much for your time. And thanks for coming on the show. And I'm looking forward to hearing your podcast when it comes out.
Oh, I can't wait to start, and I'm really excited. And yeah, this has been really fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steph. As always, all the links are in the show notes. Check them out. You can follow me on Instagram, v.germany.experience. You can go to thegermanyexperience.de/subscribe to get links to all kinds of things like my latest episodes, my newsletter, my social media accounts, and subscribe to this podcast on different platforms. So go to thegermanyexperience.de/subscribe. Music in this episode, theme song by my band, 10 Cent Janes. Other music in the episode, Until the End by Ryan Anderson. And I will talk to you next week. Auf Wiederhören.